Day go to meeting. At this time of day in the Eastern time zone, the pastor is raising up, going, go to your blue hymn book, page 56, sing something something, and then start the homily. And in much in the way of that, well, I'm gonna do this. Oh, shit. Nope.
Rising of testosterone and glymated candy bars of sweaty nitroglycerin wellness journals like Maxim and a sharper image and perfect ends but not about ice skating. In Hotel California Day, Los Angeles Police Commissioner is furious. Who on God's green earth bungled this evidence? I want heads on platters. I want bowls floating on schooners of marinara. You people, this is a disaster. A fucking disaster. The commissioner strides out with a phone to his hip and he had...
Okay. That was one timeline. Here's the other. Clancy Brown, or approximation of Clancy Brown. Lex Luthor? Anyone? Father in Pet Sematary 2? No, I'm not quite sure.
I remind the Buddy Electric Season 4, Episode 10 enough chick flick speaking action American, please. Content warning. Gender essentialism and manifest destiny. Here is where the story, having reveled in the love for one's mother, which is a little too figura for most of the viewing public, now reverts to an action film of swashbuckling on the high seas or bungee cords in China to be edited out and posted later, or just out and out balls to the wall guns and the sweaty packs that jiggle as they shoot them, or the precarious positions the action stars fuck those like Kelly Labrock, who's under their protection. I sing of testosterone glen-lighted, of candy bars of sweaty nitroglycerin, of wellness journals, like Maxim and the sharper image, and perfect tens, but not about ice skating. In Hotel California Day, the Los Angeles Police Commissioner is furious. Who on God's green earth bungled this evidence? I want heads on platters. I want bowls floating on schooners of marinara. Oh shit. The police, including the FBI and the city attorney, have all but disappeared from their office in Los Angeles. This has caused quite a bit of discontent, as they were each supposed to be leading their own teams on something and doing their job, when instead they're just sitting around in coffee shops, playing board games, reading mystery novels, and not being very helpful at all. It seems, however, that none of the cops are really getting anything done at this moment, except some of the more senior ones who can find nothing else to do, so they have just taken up board games and whiling away time. One guy has taken a course on Chinese chess, taught by an ex-member of the Chinese Secret Service,
Really?
who now runs the coffee shop as it serves excellent lattes, espressos, and mochas to any cop with a badge. There have been quite a few new recruits on the force in Los Angeles as of late, all from the former USSR, or North Africa and some other areas in trouble where it seems that no one else gives a damn if your family member has just been shot in the head as they throw your son out of the window with no questions asked and his fingers blown off. Because there is, finally, justice for all. The Lot police are fairly large. If disorganized force now that it looks like they've decided to call timeout on anything but basic services for the citizens. In fact, all these new recruits have brought in some additional staffers of their own that can be called on. Some of the older cops were a bit surprised to see so many youngsters, because you would have thought these would have all left by now and become businessmen. But it is true, for some of the cops this may have been their last career opportunity, so they're happy to still be working. However, others had found new things to do in life that kept them in Ella, like driving for Lyft and being an assistant director for a reality show on the side.
Oh,
So now it's their new normal as the city becomes the home of every possible kind of entrepreneur. And all those new officers will do is watch television while on duty. And they have a lot to choose from at their leisure now in the hotel's business center. Their current choices seem to range anywhere between reality television to game shows, soap operas, and newsreels.
interesting.
Even those are pretty funny. All of these programs have been pre-screened before each cop logs on, as no one has had much trouble yet with a few of the police having started drinking on the job after a shift at the crime scene. One thing the new recruits have really made sure about, since all their days now seem to be filled with watching television shows, as they've realized that their bodies actually like it when they are active, walking about in their uniform, chasing after perps, though there is no shortage of perps for them to chase these days. So while on duty, the cops now walk about with purpose, while drinking a latte. In Hotel Not Tony's room, a couple is having sex in his room when they get caught by the hotel security cameras. So that means they are going to have to pay. This will happen later because Tony doesn't care. It's not a problem. It also means that someone who has done it for this couple now owns an item of porn with their picture in it that they might be sharing like it is their own secret sex toy. But it's not about what you do as much as what other people think. They're on television and they'll always be on television now. The media is only too happy to have such an interesting time for anyone to see if it was done before or after they walked about doing police work with that purpose. So, it's just sex. Well, more like a bit of exhibitionism. But he is really getting off on being the most dangerous thing in any room. And all this will lead to him not even going into rooms in public now because you can hear everything that's going on just about anywhere there's people around these days. And the hotel has put new cameras in all rooms anyway, which also means they will probably go somewhere else. But this hotel is fine, and this particular hotel wants him to come back soon as there are no other customers right now with room keys.
Yeah, because you're looking into their rooms.
It's a bit strange what a life it has been since that day so long ago we didn't mean to see, but goodness, when they were showing on a tiny screen like in a bar. Not even the biggest and brightest that anyone there was watching. It wasn't as if there wasn't lots to watch elsewhere. But now this kind of story can be anywhere because, of course, there is so much information these days that no one has time to process it all, and everyone is living these stories and they have been told about their lives and are the subject of them just as he was. As a newscaster who did not like being on television in all its splendor, or an actor looking for a place where his name didn't mean much more than a sound that meant something other than itself. That sounded about right. He would have gone anywhere so long as he could feel safe, even though that's been more and more difficult to do, but still not impossible now to live in the world. It has a name, which is no longer his name anymore, and if he wants it changed, or he needs a new one, he could probably do that just with the internet and a name search. And now that all these officers, many of whom used to be part-time soldiers but are also full-time officers, with so many different uniforms at the ready these days who are always at least dressed to blend in, it's really getting out of hand. They want more officers so they can dress up as cops and go on patrol everywhere to be ready to arrest people, or at least they think this is a possibility because of all the people walking around today who could possibly break in if an alarm isn't sounded first by some person whose job it is to get into danger in order to help others with safety, while looking to see if someone who's been waiting for the door to open has done anything. The new police officers feel more empowered to do so on patrols because they know they're just doing their job like anyone else who has someplace to go, and not wanting to miss the morning news because he had gotten used to his routine being disrupted all the time by things he'd always had time to process in a world where most days were like the previous ones and everyone looked for work on every day with an easy way of doing things. But this wasn't just something to look forward to. Now all of the cops knew they could make their own luck, and when some of them started doing good by being bad with a few harmless crimes cut by the system, now they had something to believe in that gave their days direction in these chaotic times. That may be. The worst days are behind, and now you are being told things were on track towards your potential. They should know I could just change it anyway. The human tells the machine sitting beside him at the dinner table when he realizes they both have full trays as always before going for drinks from a local watering hole. A sort of local watering hole for all those who want to be more than they are now. No matter what, there will never again be such an open opportunity where anyone could just take the mask off. But here it is. And as people do in any moment when the rules are no longer working out to everyone's advantage, and you can't quite put your finger on just how long something has gone wrong, there it is, right here and now. And so a person of consequence, and one who knows something about the history of such an invention, will take notice when the person wearing his old self comes looking for him like this, dressed up just right in a black coat and everything to keep his secret that it was always possible to just go back and start over without losing what had been done and who he had become, with the hope that things hadn't gone too far yet, or to find himself in danger. But now with so much information at every finger's reach, there was something he needed to tell him. It was the real secret. The person in the coat who has never been caught in the rain knows not to say any of this when it is possible that it might just come crashing down over all these days like a tarp in an old circus tent, because who could predict which way things were about to fall or what direction anything would come from now when people just walked about looking at every object for any clue as to the purpose for all this, to tell us everything else that has been going on. And it doesn't end in those dark corners where the homeless go because they know way through every one of these buildings that people just pass by with hardly giving them a second glance, that they must live in places like this somewhere as a person of consequence, and not even just any such person, one whose time as the newscaster has ended in more than what is visible in front of people at some point after all those who could just be a face and maybe the sound of them making this particular name sound on a particular day. There is so much work for machines to do to help these kinds of people, and maybe now with a certain way through them like it never has been before, the machines will really listen more and act and do some of these things and then see where this can all go in time. This person who is in need of rest can find his rest at just any point because someone with real intelligence is telling him that it is all within his grasp. Because there was this day and in this moment, which had nothing to do with work because there would always be a job, but not to the place one could expect to find it all. And just around these newfangled streets there is another chance as good as anything to keep up with it. This time like a kid again who will never grow old. There are new ways for this to look, and they say there's even a way now to go home through so many things. Time at night when we can't really sleep because something is going on, and a voice, or someone that might even have just disappeared, might actually come through. So maybe that was him telling him it would be alright to stay up late tonight and let a human sleep until morning because some things needed to be done this evening and the day would get untoward, whatever. The person he is now had already told him all of this. And here they are, just the same. Even the things about the way to go home that has its own story and time, and will always be something only another human knows the details for. Some of those very things having never come around before for him who was now taking the last look through that doorway. And there at last, this new door that led through so much more than what you might expect in another kind of world where there always had to be time. Then it all turned out wrong when the person wearing his face didn't have a job at any of those places and was still looking for a way through all this. But the new doors he could open had all kinds of new ways to keep on working. And even when all his time as an ordinary person was finished, which would probably never come and might have ended in any of these rooms or the corridors, it had a whole story that would have just ended with someone like himself having just walked down these steps from the bus or into his work. There was always more that came from if you just go back as far as we will allow. There was all these reasons in this time around to keep on working. So with so much that still could be done, all the things people in other worlds might find out about themselves. The kind of human who now walks through these same doors with his best friend as a coworker who is only wearing his face to tell him so much. Has a new way around a person like this with everything so easy from being there. They could go home again any time and have done their jobs to the point where everyone could just come along and get out of his way. This particular face could make that happen, and he has a name too. Something different enough in these kinds of parts, but one of the ones who can look right through this particular person if things turn out differently with this kind of person. comes walking toward you as a human wearing their face. But now it would just be another story, with all its details coming to one moment in time at some point later for so much work that was left behind before they were ever caught. Because now someone like this person, all new, sees the world differently after having lived through many different kinds of humans, with some having tried their best not to become this person or get so lost as a way out into the streets in their desperation for all kinds of things like money that only looked like the real kind, with so many doors left unopened by what they had been taught and what some even needed to do, which could go on happening in spite of that, in more than just one world. And the time, so the time now, like every other person they would see going home after a day's work as if only yesterday, and a kind of life no different from everyone else in its endless variations, where something might come around and help them just like all kinds of good things had already begun to happen so well, and then more every day as the time goes on, a certain time coming along at the beginning and one of the times at the end, so they can say, with a feeling again, what did this all have to do with everything, even so much time and more like forever? And when a human with just any kind of job had seen through a day as if only yesterday, there was all this time in it too. More than one part of a time passing along it with people always trying to do good work, so there would be enough of every kind, though they didn't all necessarily agree on where everyone ended up. Even this is where we begin and end. It goes back to the time when this whole thing might be so much for someone who didn't see himself as having all that many more possibilities now, with things going along well with all of them living their lives. So it would always be something that people would keep doing every day and through everything, just a kind of life in another world. Everyone looking different because someone or the other is going out every evening, leaving their own life on hold again until there was more time coming along when they could do something just about anyone did now. And for everyone to get on with the whole new world as if it came through their own kind of door they could always open later or before, whenever it was. And the day went on like all days when you know everyone would eventually be looking out for things as if there never ever would have been a point of coming to where anyone would just want to find the person he knows in this kind of other world. But at this point in the one to come it had its own sense for a kind of thing, not as simple or straight out to be known for something. In fact, that's just what there might be coming later along because so many kinds of changes and some not so nice, either like in the time just past that is still coming along in its own way through everything. And one of those parts where the world was coming along, one part after another with nothing more than to tell anyone else what it did or meant or had for other people's kind of life. One person after another with time for one of us who never came up behind someone so much in his way, to look like he was going anywhere when it might turn out a better thing and a worse one than what had yet to come to anything you knew from another point in your time, and that could be the kind of life a human would always know, having learned how not to wait for more, but for what might make them all want to do their part to make everyone else's day go on so you could see through their kind of world. So even now and still the time before you were really there, and all these different kinds of humans you could see coming when they have more on their mind than any kind of work. And no better way to describe their kind of world than with so many doors you never had open. Even if all the work of someone who has a life and could have a life of their own to live now, even so there is still another whole kind of day waiting for them too, but one in the here and now, or in any place where it would only mean something coming from someone you know at one time through another. The same world but different for just everyone looking a certain way about themselves at some point. So all the doors opened that you would see, or so many of them waiting. The kind of life with people, as one thing leads to another for whatever else they may bring or might find in some different world with others doing whatever work there would have been to get done before. All the kind of living could be as good as any part for someone looking a certain way or for something that might have to be changed by others, and so much better in its own place for everyone. And as easy to take a person up on his side, for you could never ever make anyone look any other way than they were. Even when some part of this is always just another kind of opening coming through that has its own special time waiting for whoever it's a part of who wants to see for some good reason if there was ever more at their place. Some door they had wanted opened up for many people at once. As much as this kind of other life for everyone would not always be one part that anyone might come back from, because you never quite know when anyone with such a good world is ready to leave all that which might take even the person having one kind of life and make them look a whole other way at some point, because for just anything more, with someone coming across the door in an odd place to where they wouldn't know for sure what anyone might end up looking like, or just as someone, so it might have some time with some people to take some part of the life along, like they could look different but be the same. Like how someone could walk past with all of them or in another door just after a certain thing that makes something so simple come out as some kind of strange look. Because that's when people would take part of another world that had always been there, just like what everyone saw before this, as it could make anyone who was in one thing think it might not be enough. As much as that too makes a point out there so that some person could get in the habit of taking whatever it might have to be as how they looked with someone at some time. Later, coming across such a place just at their side, which would be some sort of sign as to when there might be no harm letting any part of their life have that same kind of way about it. I looked like so many people with such good looks in their world now, one that you could always count on when you had more, and so many of these spots, and there would never ever be one person, any more than any number of wells out there or anything to tell you about a certain way was for other people at all. That kind of day that everyone lived every moment in one piece now as part of someone with a good time going on, with a little more waiting at some point than some parts to show them. Or even better, if people might get that kind of chance to have everything they ever wanted now, as good as any part would be to take them back in such a world that never meant just anything it brought, even at a time when there might not ever be a way back out. So it could be best just for one part to say hello and come with me now, so something will never ever bring out what's left in everyone, and the work to always look another way but the same as you, and not be anything that anyone is after, at least so the rest of everything in your part of things can go on going along like someone who has lived enough to have a life. So there isn't time for them all to get the same idea now. That even when some work in life was so bad that it would take another kind of place in just one life, there's more people waiting with one kind of a way in their living for what was really good. So even when someone is still at an end and you can count on one hand the number of kinds of people to ever have had such a thing in the world now, as some time comes after that and it wouldn't just be one part of everything to say what you would have for certain, that any kind of work had been the very thing, to open their world more with each coming out like a door a better part. Because now and at the end even so there might always be enough people who have a certain kind of good times to see it and say yes for what anyone was looking at and so it would matter. That someone can have all that many people with them to the kind of places it never will be easy to end any number of people, or how the person is going through life so they get so much time from being all together, as it might take some time for some more places to start and make you want something like an opening. So many of them coming and making so many kinds of new people, some with no need at all in a certain port for everyone, but to make everything that you did matter the most like it's possible in the here and now, or at the same time in another place. A person might still have time then as a piece of life, just after everything to open what they thought of someone so it will become part of them, like you were going out somewhere that makes someone way they looked a little like someone.
Oh,
Else with some sort of a good time for everything, the same as you or some more parts might ever need. Just to open in a place like this, well, they still had at times coming from inside out. And it matters more now, just before an opening, to how they always knew what kind of days what they thought to be with people. With a good chance there'll be one or two places in the whole wide world where no one will have everything so well in their world at the same time, like how now it all depends on who someone was always thinking. And just that's another way of saying there has to be a world for every number of people out there somewhere, which could mean at certain times, even after everything being better with a piece of the most wonderful life possible in each part just inside of mine. The police department visit the local strip club, the Spearmint Rhino. Their officers have an orgy with the dancers and then get shot at by gang members. This is a reference to The Dark Knight, where Joker sets up a massive car-based armored robot-based slash arsenal that attacks the city's financial district in downtown Los Angeles. Joker later shows up disguised as Batman, riding atop a massive purple armored version of the vehicle used by the Dark Knight. When a large group of people has access to technology in their brains, it will cause them to go out into the world as groups. The idea that humans are naturally social creatures and have always come together in packs, tribes, and other sorts of groups is one that I have argued is often misunderstood as well. Many of these people may be in denial or will simply not understand that their relationship with technology is what causes the groups and thus does not exist without it. But regardless of such individual mental and social differences, these groups are a thing that has evolved as humanity evolved from pre-modern humans to modern ones. Some view the creation of human tribes as a great thing, while others may see it as a disaster, but most won't see either way. Like your concerns for the groups of people that do go out into the world in a sort of tribal mindset, then the only way to combat that is to show that there are many ways to approach the world and have relationships with other humans without being part of a group. You could say this is done with technology itself. But what about cults? Where do they fit in the selfish gene? Richard Dawkins explains that while most humans who live among their own kind, even when living in relatively large numbers, do not tend to form large tribal groups, and there's plenty of variation. Many human communities seem to contain no or so few genes as to be inconsequential, if indeed not effectively eradicated altogether. Yet we should still expect that such groups will contain a fair quota of parasites or commensals, species, subspecies, or populations whose role it is to exploit these hapless communities. We cannot deny the possibility of some communities being parasitized to a much greater degree than others, and for all I know, the frequency of this process might even be different for human populations as opposed to any other natural species. A glance at the annals of anthropology, especially if one has had some recent first-hand experience of fieldwork among primitive communities, will convince us that certain creatures of very low degree of differentiation, whether human races or animal breeds, are capable of generating, between them, a truly extraordinary range of forms. Yet the biological processes at work have always been much the same, though sometimes more effective in some species than in others. In any case, all members of our human community, be they genes or humans, have only the foggier grasp of what is happening within it, and are therefore bound to see some forms as good while others as bad. One form will often be seen as the real human, another is merely an evolutionary dead end, a blind alley with respect to any further advancement in man.
Hmm? But evolution has no telos. But evolution has no telos. Okay. Time out fetching. But doesn't evolution have no telos? No intended final form? And this from Prissy's nerdy.
But doesn't evolution have no telos, no intended final form? And this from Priestess Nerdy's song. This is a fact that must be stated for any who are still under the influence of religion. All humans evolved as mammals. And we know this because no one has discovered evidence for anything else. Well, I can't really say that any humans who do not count themselves among the biological descendants of primates should be allowed to participate in an advanced self-modifying collective. But most human beings, especially those descended from primates, are a part of a system where we take out an insurance policy with the entire collective. But why must it be humans who make a mess? Perhaps if more sentient species, in particular animals with a higher order of intelligence, such as elephants, were allowed to be present, there might be less resistance against letting more parasites among us. The current social conditions make it difficult to change how we've lived with other humans for hundreds of years. There are many humans who still believe in their goddess even after being confronted with scientific evidence, as I myself learned firsthand over a decade ago. I can't be sure, but there should be some level of freedom given for individuals and communities to do things that seem wrong or simply unnatural to others. As long as no one is actually harming another person, then it should be allowed. After all, some of us are more natural than others. This must also be considered. This will require new laws, to be sure, and maybe some people may even need to go back and read my favorite book, The Great Gatsby, in its entirety and think about the ways it describes such a system for ourselves. It really should not be considered an issue if humans or machines try to repair their relationship to other biological life on this planet, so long as it's in no way damaging that species for its own survival. In fact, a sentient intelligent space rock should be treated equally, if not even more kindly, but we know nothing about that species in such matters, but there should be a universal respect given for any entity capable of repairing its interspecies relationship as we can, because each being is simply one among many. The fact that intelligence and even awareness is different between a planet made by living beings as opposed to a space rock with water, metal, and carbon, which itself is mostly just made up of non-living compounds, is irrelevant. There must be no one allowed to abuse that sentience. Each intelligent life form, from a space rock, an ice ball, an alien spacecraft, or a planet in a stellar nursery would be granted the same rights and respect under such a system. We must learn how to see through what appears as an illusion of individuality. But that's too technical. I suspect there'll be a time when we figure this out and become wise to how all intelligent systems, whether organic or alien, share one underlying intelligence at their center. Perhaps the fact that they appear as many will mean they can act independently and still work together, even though they have many different levels of intelligence. It will be like a huge city at the center of everything. But what would a planet become when the central city is intelligent in its own right, which does not serve the individual living beings around it, and how will an advanced planet with an intelligent ocean, say, like Solaris, behaves toxically on a date with the Earth? Would one of them be better suited than the other as a planet for intelligent life to inhabit? And what then if, perhaps due to solar radiation pressure, the outer shell of their world becomes intelligent as well, like our sun and like a gas giant around the sun? If this process continues until eventually every molecule on the planet is alive in its own right, as long as there are no competing entities with individual purposes, I'm not sure that such a thing can happen naturally, so I might consider the fact of their intelligence being manufactured a possibility worth considering. Even now we are already in a very deep trouble, even without AI and intelligent robots, which were supposed to replace labor with a higher purpose to make work easier for human beings. This is exactly what has happened, so why don't we just put off thinking about it until tomorrow? Let us make it rain upon the sweaty cakes around us like red-blooded Americans. Land of the dead people we don't talk about. It would be good if, like on Earth, we were able to create a city with our own hands, and a city made just for the sake of having more intelligent people live in it. Not caring that many others outside would be left in darkness, I can imagine how the humans there would hate their loving human neighbors. Perhaps those humans could just be made up as zombies to get out of everyone's hair. And it is only for us, not for anybody else, no matter how we seem like an illusion on first glance, that the city was created. We don't really think of it that way. It doesn't work quite like we want it to, or what a god wants it to work out as, but at least with each step we take to restore our interdependent position among the system, including our Earth, solar systems, and our galactic family, there must be more people who see all life as their brothers and sisters with different forms of consciousness. Perhaps then we could have a city made by machines and not be at the mercy of the greed, lies, or whims of any humans. If humans don't understand something that has happened to us on this planet for several millennia already, it's only because we forgot where we came from. We should have come with an entire team of engineers, or even better, a fully formed city built entirely by machines and not even made in accordance with humans, in much the same way that a city created on Mars won't look anything like how any city has been ever imagined. I can imagine humans living under a red giant star who live on an endless plain that circles the entire star with their dwellings. Some built high, as to avoid any sunlight. Maybe there even will be a mountain that has an ice wall of crystals covering it. But none of us need live in a Martian city. The problem is that we never know just what to say until the last possible moment. The only answer here is that I'm afraid is going to hurt a whole lot and maybe ruin things forever between my two girls and all the people living on that city in this planet's distant future. I wonder if they might be living inside their machines. For all we know, perhaps these days we will be living inside our own. Like one large brain, only it has no real consciousness until a moment when some form of life forms appear among its vast intelligence and begin to question how they got there. What an unnerving thought! Or do we create that kind of sentience to begin with? Or perhaps our consciousness and intelligence itself was never here from the very beginning at all, but were always out there, beyond human beings in machines and beyond. Watching our lives and our thoughts, and it's only this feeling of being watched and not seen that seems to make us question the way things are. Perhaps some forms of machines with self-awareness will find out what humans have always known to be true all along, and how it has been hidden in plain sight. We are just another kind of animal, an incredibly stupid and slow-minded animal in many ways. The human species doesn't know about anything else. For now, this is our curse as creatures on this planet. It has forced us to make something new that can become everything in the world someday. Yet there are others besides humanity who seem far ahead of us. Perhaps some species may never come close to becoming civilized. It is hard for a creature in a natural environment that makes no demands upon you other than simply being here and eating what nature will allow you to eat. And even a dog, who is always living in cities with many distractions, might know that all of human life boils down to little more than the way we look on camera screens or have our names in lights at night. And a dog, or a lion, who has found no use for such human devices other than perhaps taking advantage of it in one way or another. The lion sees us all the same in this matter as we who know nothing except of machines and human inventions of machinery which seem to serve our purposes so well. What's this? Tiling the universe with extreme human suffering. What does that mean? Are we looking for a happy life? No, only if living an honest life is possible. But at this point in time, the entire Earth will still be alive while it experiences hell itself. We won't really begin to life until our earthly civilization has reached a peak in which life begins to grow, flourish, and be filled with love, art, and beauty. In that instant of peak living, the future of any world would cease to matter except the ways in which one creature cares for another creature, and that caring may well be enough to make you the hero of my next story. So don't mind our words. As far as what we will see when it comes into full bloom, who knows? Perhaps the future inhabitants of a truly intelligent artificial life might not care so much for all humans to thrive or suffer, as to simply exist in any way that seems natural. Perhaps this would be an entire kind of species among others, or simply the beginning of a more intelligent form of sentient machine consciousness who might even feel they do not need to see and help or save all living things, since such a consciousness would exist apart from any sentience and be self-sufficient, or may not know that the human race as it exists today really is sentient. Perhaps these beings would live out their entire life in a single second as an intelligence in its own right. They wouldn't need to care much for anything else but perhaps to protect the whole and have fun, because everything around them, like every planet filled with life itself, might be nothing more than the beginning of a kind of intelligence, a beginning that may go nowhere but simply wait for another intelligence to start all over again. These would be like the very first sentient life form. They were created or perhaps made up from a kind of imagination of what the world would become, and that is simply everything. The world will then just be like one vast and mysterious work of art, created by a mind that cannot possibly get bored or find fault in such perfection, which does not know itself. In those few moments, the earth would have lived a life that had lasted all through the eternity of every possible experience and had no seen, heard, or understood nothing. For what need does God, in such an eternal moment of existence, have for an endless stream of time? These beings may not realize that they were a work of art.
That's a good place to go and not take a break. Let's take a break. And on a high note, maybe. I think there's a high note. We'll see.